Home was supposed to be a promise, not a trap. I'm Naomi Vale, 32, a marketing analyst, standing in my new 3-bedroom apartment in Albuquerque, pregnant and proud, the balcony strung with fairy lights that make the glassware glow. Friends drift between the kitchen island and the living room, voices soft and happy. The night smells like vanilla cake and fresh paint. I lift my glass. To beginnings, I say, and laughter rings back, warm enough to steady my nerves. For a breath, I see it all the way I dreamed it. A white crib by the window, morning sun catching the yellow walls, the quiet of a home that is finally mine. Across the room, my husband, Brandon Cole, lingers at the bar cart. His phone lights his face a cool blue. He angles the screen down when I glance over. He gives me a small smile that dies before it reaches his eyes. It's a party, I tell myself. He's tired. Tonight is supposed to be simple. Jules Rivera, my best friend since college, slips to my side with a plate of cheese and an arched brow. You did it, she whispers, threading her fingers through mine beneath the counter. The baby kicks, feather light, and joy climbs up my throat like a laugh I'm afraid to let out. The door opens. Lena Park, my older sister, steps in, late and immaculate, stilettos tapping like punctuation. Her blazer is the color of a storm cloud. She kisses my cheek with a practiced smile and surveys the room the way a realtor sizes up a listing. Naomi, she says, cool and bright. Cute place. Thanks, I answer, smoothing a napkin I don't need. For months she's been hovering, measuring windows, suggesting I refinance, asking how much I've paid and when. Questions that don't sound like care so much as claim. Family is complicated. I push the thought down with a sip of sparkling water. Lena drifts from frame to frame, fingertip to curtain edge, as if touching things writes her name on them. Brandon pours her a drink without looking at me. Their laughter skims the music, and the room tilts a degree colder. Jules leans closer. You okay? I'm fine, I say. I want it to be true. The karaoke machine pops to life. Someone shouts for a song. Lena is already at the mic, nails wrapped around the stem, eyes bright with something I don't recognize. The fairy lights hum. My heartbeat does too. If you've ever wondered how fast a celebration can curdle, it happens in the length of a breath, right before the first word leaves her mouth. If you're watching, tell me in the comments where you're tuning in from and what you'd do if a family member grabbed the mic at your own housewarming. And if you want the rest of my story, hit subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Lena lifts the microphone like it belongs to her. The chatter softens, then thins, then dies. Even the fairy lights seem to hush. She smiles into the room the way a person smiles before cutting a ribbon. I have an announcement, she says, crisp and bright. I've already spoken to a lawyer. As of today, I'm the rightful owner of this apartment. For a heartbeat, I think I've misheard, that the sound system has warped her words. Heads turn in slow motion, the way wheat bends under wind. Someone in the back laughs, one sharp, confused note that never finds a second. Lena points at me like she's calling on a student. Naomi Vale, she says, voice steady. You are no longer welcome here. You have 24 hours to vacate. The clock starts ticking in my head, loud, impossible. The room doesn't rush to correct her. It simply holds its breath. I feel the baby flicker against my palm where it rests on my stomach, as if she's listening too. Across the room, Brandon brings a glass to his mouth and sips like he's watching TV on a Tuesday night. He doesn't look at me. He doesn't look at anyone. He stares into the middle distance and lets the silence do the work. The phone he keeps face down on the bar glows and then goes dark. Jules is already at my side, her fingers lacing with mine under the edge of the island. Breathe, she whispers, so soft it's almost a thought. Just breathe. Lena keeps talking, as if she's presenting quarterly earnings. Let's not make this messy, she says. Everyone here is a witness. We can be adults about it. Excuse me? The word escapes me, thin and paper dry. I don't recognize my own voice. My mouth tastes like the aluminum rim of the seltzer can I set down too fast. The can wobbles and settles. A cousin near the balcony puts her glass down and inches closer to the door. Two coworkers glance at each other and then at me, eyes big, like they're waiting for me to either faint or explode. Someone kills the karaoke backing track. The quiet rings. What are you doing, Lena? I ask. Not loud, not strong, just the best I can manage without my throat closing. She tilts her head. Doing what's best, Naomi. The way she says my name makes it sound like a diagnosis. This place is beyond you. I'm taking responsibility. On what planet? Jules says, louder now. You don't live here. Lena's smile never wavers. Family steps in when someone's in over her head. Brandon clears his throat. It's the first sound he's made. I turn toward him without meaning to, like a plant reaching for sun. He sets his glass down and arranges his face into something like concern. Maybe we should, he begins, and stops. He doesn't finish the sentence, doesn't finish anything. He just looks down again. You have 24 hours, Lena repeats, turning back to the room like she's closing a sale. I'll make the calls in the morning. The baby kicks, harder now. I press my hand to the spot and count without thinking. 1, 2, 3. I steady my breath. I won't cry in front of them. I won't give this moment the footage it wants. Everybody, thank you for coming, I hear myself say. The words feel like stepping onto ice and pretending it's floor. Please enjoy the food. My voice is even, and that surprises me more than anything. It buys me 3 seconds, long enough to straighten the stack of napkins, long enough to find my purse, long enough to remember that I am not alone. Jules squeezes my fingers so tight it hurts in a way I'm grateful for. I'm here, she says. I'm here. From the hallway, a neighbor peeks in, sees the frozen tableau, me by the island, Lena by the mic, Brandon by the bar, and decides to retreat. Ellen from my team touches my arm, her mouth open like she wants to say something brave and can't find it. Lena lowers the microphone. She looks satisfied, like a chore checked off a list. We're done, she says, to no one in particular. You're done, Jules shoots back. Her voice is shaking but true. I stand very still and feel my heart settle into a slow, deliberate beat. The fairy lights hum again, or maybe that's just my pulse catching up. 24 hours. The number clicks into place like the lid of a suitcase. I nod once, to myself more than anyone, and lift my chin. Enjoy the party, I say, because I don't know what else to say that won't turn me into a scream. Then I walk to the sink and run the water, the simplest sound in the world, a clean line through a messy room. I don't look at Lena, I don't look at Brandon. I look at the stream until it becomes a thread I can hold. Behind me, chairs scrape. The first guests drift out in quiet pairs. The door opens and closes. The apartment breathes again, smaller now, but mine in a way that matters more in this exact second than any declaration into a microphone. I dry my hands, turn off the tap, and feel my daughter move. 24 hours. I let the words settle in my mouth like a vow. The week after we signed the lease, the apartment smelled like cardboard and fresh paint. I stacked plates in the kitchen and watched sun pool across the floor like a blessing. Brandon hugged me from behind, chin on my shoulder, and said we'd finally done it. We stayed up late scrolling through furniture sites, arguing softly about rugs. It felt like a life we could live inside for a long time. Then the schedule shifted. Brandon started coming home late, claiming a new client had him on. The first night, I waited with takeout that went cold. The second, I ate alone at the island. the stool legs scraping the tile in a room that echoed too much. When he did come in, he'd set his phone face down on the counter like it needed protection. A message would light the underside with a dull glow, and he'd palm it, turning away to read. "Just work," he'd say, already moving down the hall. I told myself busy is normal. Promotions don't land themselves. I nested, folded tiny onesies, labeled boxes for nursery, held paint chips against the wall, and pictured morning light on yellow. One Saturday, I came back from the grocery store with arms full and found the door unlocked. Inside, Lena stood in the living room with a tape measure stretched wide, the metal tongue glinting like a smile. She didn't turn when I said her name. "These curtains won't do," she murmured, jotting numbers in her phone. "You'll want linen, floor length. It's classier." "How did you get in?" I asked, the bags cutting into my fingers. "Brandon gave me a key." She said it like that made her family a landlord. "Relax, Naomi. I'm helping." I set the bags down and felt the room tilt. The word key kept ringing. When Brandon got home, I asked him why he hadn't told me. He kissed my forehead and said something about Lena having good taste and us being lucky. His phone buzzed on the counter. He flipped it over without looking and changed the subject to bar stools. After that, Lena's visits multiplied. She'd drop by on weekdays, her blazer sharp even in afternoon light. I'd find her flipping through the mail, pausing too long on envelopes with bank logos. Once I walked in and she was skimming the mortgage printout I'd left on the table. "Just curious," she said with a smile that never reached her eyes. "You should refinance. I know a guy who can get you a better rate." "How do you know our rate?" I asked. She shrugged. "You tell me everything." I didn't. At work, Priya Shah noticed me zoning out mid-meeting, my hand pressed absently to the small rise of my stomach. "You look wiped," she said, sliding a travel mug of tea across my desk. "Everything okay at home?" "Just settling in," I lied, tracing the teal ring her mug left on a sticky note. The baby fluttered, a soft reminder that I owed someone more than polite answers. Nights thickened. Brandon showered with the bathroom fan roaring, took his phone into the bedroom, and slept on the edge of the mattress, a dark coastline I couldn't reach. When I asked who he was texting, he said team and kissed my temple like a receipt. Lena's texts landed at odd hours, nested with suggestions that sounded like orders. "Did you make the first payment yet? You should repaint. I have a contractor." The phrasing tightened over time. "This place needs upgrades. Let me manage it." I started noting dates in the margin of my planner. Not to make a case, just to convince myself I wasn't imagining patterns. Tuesday, key. Friday, refinance. Monday, phone face down, 11:42 p.m. Ping. Little scratches along the surface of a brand new thing. Jules came by with a plant and a laugh that could brighten bad weather. She tucked the pot by the window and said it would like the light. When Brandon slipped out to call back a vendor, she watched the door swing shut, then looked at me. "You sure he's okay?" she asked. "He's busy," I said. The answer tasted thin even to me. At night I lay awake and listened to the building settle, the pipes click, the city hum. I counted baby kicks and ceiling holes where we hadn't hung fixtures yet. Boundaries don't break in a crash, I learned. They erode, grain by grain, until one day your key doesn't sound like the only one in the lock. Sometimes one sentence remaps your life. I didn't know yet which sentence it would be, but I felt the floor begin to redraw beneath my feet. The morning after the party, the apartment was a museum of plates and half-empty glasses. I woke before the light and stood in the kitchen with the fridge humming like a thought I couldn't shake. Brandon's laptop sat on the island where he'd left it, lid closed, charger snaking down the cabinet. I touched the aluminum like it might burn and opened it. No password prompt, just his inbox blooming onto the screen. At first I didn't know what I was looking for. Then my eyes caught a subject line pinned near the top, starred and calm as a trap. Unit title docs. My stomach tightened. I clicked. The thread ran for weeks. Brandon, a paralegal I didn't recognize, and Lena CC'd on almost everything. The early messages were logistics, attachments, resend please, see revised schedule. Then the tone shifted. A reply from Brandon. She doesn't need to be looped in on this part. I'll handle it. Lena answered 5 minutes later. Agreed. We can keep this clean. I opened the attachments with hands that stopped feeling like mine. There was our mortgage contract, my legal name in black letters I recognized from checks and tax forms, a scan of the deed filing, again with my name. Another PDF, draft, title transfer request. That looked like the others until you read who the requesting party was. Not me. I scrolled and scrolled. My heart did the same. In one message, Brandon forwarded an image of my signature from a lease application I'd signed years ago, circled in red. In another, he wrote, "Once she's out, we can formalize. 30 days max." The cursor blinked in the reply field like it wanted me to speak. I took a photo of the screen with my phone, then another of the attachments list, and emailed the thread to myself with a subject line I'd know in a panic. Kitchen, 6:12 a.m. I closed the laptop, unplugged it, and left it exactly as it had been. The room seemed to tilt an inch and then hold. At lunch, Priya Shah texted, "Diner on Central? I've got something." I walked there with my jacket open to the January sun and sat in a booth that smelled like coffee and hot syrup. Priya slid in across from me, eyes serious. She put her phone face down, then flipped it and pushed it toward me. A photo bloomed. Brandon and Lena at a corner table in a cafe I knew, their heads tilted close, her hand on his sleeve. Time-stamped from last week. I didn't want to believe it either, Priya said softly. But I saw them, and I heard just enough. She scrolled to a screenshot of a notification she'd captured. Brandon's name lighting up Lena's screen with a preview. She's clueless. We'll move fast. The diner noise went thin around the edges. I swallowed, felt the burn, and nodded. "Thank you," I said, because there was nothing else that fit in my mouth. She squeezed my hand across the table. "Save everything," she said. "Start now." Back home, I sat on the edge of the bed and listened to the bathroom fan drone while Brandon showered. Steam crawled under the door like a fog. I opened my phone's recorder, stared at the red circle, and pressed it. Then I called Lena. She answered on the second ring, voice bright like a showroom. "Busy day," she said. "What do you need, Naomi?" "I need to know why you did that," I said, keeping my tone level. "At my party, in my home." A beat, then a sigh that sounded bored. "Because it's too much for you," she said. "You're emotional, you're pregnant, you're making poor decisions. I'm resolving things." "Resolving by claiming my apartment?" "By taking responsibility," she said, and the word landed like a gavel. "Step aside. Brandon and I will take care of it." "Brandon and you," I repeated, because I wanted to hear it with her air in it. She didn't correct herself. "It'll be cleaner if you don't fight." I ended the call and stared at the wall until the paint turned into a field, and the field turned back into paint. Then I named the audio file Storm 1 and saved it to the cloud. I took screenshots of the email thread I'd forwarded, dragged them into a folder with Priya's photo, and labeled it like a promise, receipts. In the quiet that followed, the baby moved, a small, decisive roll. I put my hand over the spot and let my breath even out. I didn't have answers yet, but I had beginnings, a trail of paper, a voice on a line, a picture that didn't care who wanted it deleted. I closed the laptop and the folder and the part of me that still hoped this was a misunderstanding. Then I stood up. I texted Jules, "Come now." 10 minutes later, she was at my door in sweats and a messy bun, the kind of uniform you wear when you mean business. We cleared the island and turned the kitchen into a war room. I airdropped the screenshots, backed up the audio file, and slid Priya's photo into a new folder on my desktop. I named it Receipts, not clever, just true. Jules labeled subfolders with quick, neat hands: email, audio, photo, docs. Duplicate everything, she said, already plugging in a spare drive. Cloud drive, my laptop, your phone. We sat shoulder to shoulder under the soft hum of the stove light, building a spine for the story I didn't want to be telling. I forwarded the unit title docs thread to a fresh account I'd made on the walk back from the diner. I printed the mortgage and deed, my name stark and right where it belonged. Jules clicked through settings and set two-factor on my email, bank, even my smart thermostat. At least lock the doors they can't see, she said, and I nodded, grateful for clear verbs. I called a number Priya sent for an attorney she trusted, Marisol Grant, and left a message. She called back before I lowered the phone. Her voice was level and unhurried, a glass of water placed on a hot table. "I can see you in 2 hours," she said. "Bring whatever you have." I packed the folder with printed copies and the drive with backups. On the way out, Jules grabbed my coat and the plant she'd given me weeks ago, tucking it closer to the window. "It likes light," she said, as if that counted for anything and also for everything. Marisol's office sat over a yoga studio, all white walls and quiet. She greeted us with warm palms and clear eyes, then listened, really listened, as I laid out the pieces. Lena's takeover at my party, Brandon's email thread, the draft transfer, the call where Lena said she'd take responsibility. I watched her pen move in small, decisive strokes. "Ownership is in your name," she said when I finished. "That's anchor number 1. She tapped the printouts. "We'll document privacy breaches, the apparent forgery, and the collusion. I want originals or certified copies where possible." A knock, then the paralegal stepped in with the copier tray stacked full. Marisol slid a checklist toward me. Timelines, device logs, witness list, a request for the full email headers. "Start a written log today," she said. "Time, date, what happened, who was present. Emotion is real, but paper is what moves." As we packed up, my phone buzzed. Priya again. "My friend at Fairway Realty found something. Sending now." A PDF landed. Title transfer request. Park. The signature was a version of mine that tilted wrong, like a smile copied by someone who's only seen it in photos. A fake payment history listed contributions from Lena. My stomach turned cold and steady at the same time. Marisol studied it. "Good," she said. "Keep that chain of custody tight. We'll subpoena source if needed." Outside, the late sun threw a clean line down the block. I texted Brandon. "Can we talk? 5 at the park?" He answered fast. 10 minutes. Jules squeezed my elbow. "You're not going alone," she said. "I'll be close." At the park, the trees made a quiet tunnel. I set my phone to record and slid it into my coat pocket. Brandon arrived in a pale jacket, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning for an easy exit. "What do you want to talk about?" he asked, voice thin. "The apartment," I said. "And Lena." He looked past me, past the playground, anywhere but at my face. "It got complicated," he said. "It wasn't supposed to go this far. You and my sister are trying to take my home." My voice didn't shake. "Say it out loud." He exhaled, a sound like a tire losing air. "She said we could sell, split the money, you'd land on your feet." He shrugged, small and ugly. "It's practical." "Practical," I repeated, because I wanted to remember the exact word. He didn't disagree. He didn't apologize. He just kept looking away. I ended the recording when he did, when the thin jacket and thinner spine walked back to the street without turning. Jules stepped from the path where she'd waited, the set of her jaw telling me she'd heard enough without hearing anything. Back at the apartment, we added the audio file to receipts and wrote down the time and place. I sent Marisol an update. Then I opened my planner and drew a straight line under today's date. I wasn't out of time. I had a clock, a team, and a trail that didn't care whether anyone liked it. I clicked the lamp off and felt my daughter move, steady and sure, like agreement. The courtroom smelled like wood polish and old paper. Morning light cut through the high windows and settled on the benches like a verdict already waiting. Marisol and I sat at counsel table. My hands found each other and held on. Across the aisle, Lena adjusted a slate blazer and stared straight ahead. Brandon kept his eyes on the floor, the way he always did when the truth walked into the room. When our case was called, Marisol stood. Her voice was calm, the kind that makes people lean in because it never has to shout. She set our story down one piece at a time, clean and unhurried. Exhibit A, the mortgage and deed, my name, in legal type, where it belonged. Exhibit B, the unit title docs thread, emails showing Brandon sharing my documents, looping Lena in, writing she doesn't need to be looped in. I'll handle it. Exhibit C, the title transfer request, Park, with a signature that looked like mine until you looked twice and saw it didn't know how my hand curves an N. Exhibit D, the recording where Lena said she'd take responsibility, and the park conversation where Brandon called the plan practical. The judge listened without interrupting, pen tapping once, then still. On the evidence screen, my printed name filled the room in black letters. I felt the baby roll and pressed my palm there, steady. Lena's attorney rose with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He called it a family misunderstanding, said Lena had supported us, that she acted in good faith to protect a shared investment. He said the recording lacked context. He said a lot of things that looked thin against paper. Marisol didn't move much when she cross-examined. She kept her questions short, her tone plain. "Miss Park," she said, holding up the transfer form. "Who authored this request?" Lena said she didn't recall. "Whose idea was it to exclude Ms. Vale from the email chain?" Lena said logistics were fluid. "Explain the mismatch between Ms. Vale's authentic signature here," Marisol lifted the deed, "and the one on your request." The room went quiet enough to hear jackets crease. Lena's mouth pressed into a line that wasn't an answer. Then Brandon took the stand. He cleared his throat, glanced at Lena, glanced away. Marisol asked whether he forwarded my signature and documents without my consent. He said he had. She asked if he told Lena I was clueless and that they would move fast. He looked at his hands and said yes. She played the park recording. His practical filled the space like a stain. The judge leaned forward. "Ms. Park, one more time, this signature, how was it created?" Lena's voice thinned. "I relied on information Brandon provided." The judge's pen stopped. Ruling came without drama. "Title remains with Ms. Vale," the judge said, eyes even. "There is no legal basis for Ms. Park's claim." She referred the forged transfer for fraud investigation. On Brandon, she didn't linger. She assigned damages for privacy violations and unauthorized disclosure, numbers that made him flinch. The gavel fell, sharp as a door latch. Air moved in my lungs like I'd been underwater and hadn't noticed. Marisol squeezed my shoulder once. Across the aisle, Lena stared at a spot on the wall like it might open. Brandon kept studying the floor that never learned to answer for him. Outside, the hallway was bright and ordinary. I signed the copies, thanked the clerk, and stepped into the kind of sun that doesn't ask permission. My phone buzzed. "Jules, you okay?" I texted back, "Yes, anchor holds." Then I laid a hand on my belly and let the quiet reach me. The law had spoken. Now it was my turn. We left the courthouse, and I didn't go home. Marisol walked me down the block to her office, and the receptionist set a manila folder on the conference table like a small, necessary fire. The divorce papers were already prepared. We'd planned for this moment even if part of me hadn't let it in. I read each page, signed my name where the tabs asked me to, and felt something unhook from the back of my ribs. Filing this afternoon, Marisol said, sliding the packet into a courier envelope. We'll arrange service. You don't have to see him. Thank you, I said, and meant all the words a person means when she only says two. Outside, the sun was clean on the sidewalk. I texted Jules, done. She replied with a heart and a car emoji. When I reached the apartment, she was already there with boxes, tape, and the kind of snacks you eat standing up. We packed Brandon's scattered shirts into a single bag and left it by the hallway table. The rest, his unopened mail, his watch that always ran 3 minutes slow, we set aside for the courier. My phone buzzed twice. Priya, FYI, community page is melting down. Screenshots of Lena's owner post everywhere. Then Marisol again. Fraud unit acknowledged referral. They'll contact you only if needed. I opened a browser and saw what Priya meant. Lena's glossy declaration from the party had been shared, dissected, and saved in a dozen places. The comments had shifted from praise to questions, then to something heavier. You could see the moment the wind changed. I didn't respond. I closed the tabs and walked room to room with a roll of blue painter's tape, marking what was staying and what was moving. The fairy lights on the balcony would come with me. The yellow paint would not. That week moved like a line drawn with a firm hand. The divorce filing was served. Brandon didn't contest. Marisol forwarded his terse acknowledgement and a payment plan for the damages the judge ordered. There were no apologies, just transactions. I found a smaller apartment a few streets over, second-floor walk-up with big windows and a view of the desert sky that felt as wide as I needed. Jules drove the rented truck while I boxed up the last pieces of a life that had already left. We set the crib under the east window. She hung a curtain, stepped back, and smiled. There, she said. Light. Days folded into a rhythm that made sense again. Work, lists, prenatal appointments. In the quiet, I cleaned out my phone, deleted old threads, backed up receipts, changed passwords until the muscle of it felt strong. Priya dropped by with chili and a stack of glossy magazines she knew I wouldn't read, but wanted me to have anyway. 2 months later, the hospital room filled with morning sun. Labor was a long walk, but when the nurse placed my daughter on my chest, the world snapped into a single true shape. I named her Arya Vale. She blinked up at me with a solemnity that made me laugh through tears. Jules squeezed my shoulder, eyes shining. Hi, Arya, she whispered. Welcome to the good part. Back at home, I tucked Arya into the crib under that window and watched her small chest rise and fall like a tide. I could finally time my life to. I strung the same fairy lights along the new balcony, their hum familiar and new at once. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. I let it pass. The plant by the sill, Jules's plant, had put out a new leaf. I stood there a long time, one hand on the railing, the other on the swaddle. The apartment was quiet and honest. No keys I didn't give, no laughter that bent the room colder. I breathed in the ordinary air and felt it settle. The anchor held, and I held it. Mornings in the new place begin with quiet. The desert sky lifts itself over the rooftops, and the first light finds Arya's crib. I pad to the kitchen, start the kettle, and check locks I changed myself. Spare keys live in a small metal box with my initials. There are exactly 2. I know where both are. I set rules that fit in a single page and taped them inside the pantry door. No keys shared, no documents left out. Every account has 2-factor turned on. Paper files live in a fireproof safe. Digital copies sit in an encrypted drive labeled with a word only I would choose. Marisol's card rests in the front of my wallet. I know I won't need it every day. It steadies me anyway. On Thursdays, Jules comes by with groceries and jokes that don't ask for answers. She waters the plant by the window, now a small jungle, and reminds me to eat before the day grabs me by the shirt. On Saturdays, Priya brings coffee and stories from work that don't circle old ground. We sit on the balcony under the same fairy lights I took with me, and for a few minutes the week goes soft at the edges. The rest of it is ordinary and honest. Bills paid on time, laundry folded in neat, small stacks, stroller runs along the block until the afternoon heat asks us to head back. Arya's laugh finds the corners of the rooms and fills them with something like music. Some nights I think of the old apartment only long enough to feel the distance. I don't check the community page. I don't open threads that light my phone with names I'm finished saying. When my thoughts drift toward what was taken, I bring them back to what remained. My name on my home, my daughter's breath steady against my shoulder, the simple rightness of turning a key and knowing the door answers to me. When Arya sleeps, I sit at the table and write. Not lists this time. Promises. I promised to teach her that love doesn't live in secrets, that silence can be a kind of answer, that home is not a place someone grants you, but a space you keep. I promised to choose the life that protects us and the light that keeps growing. One evening, I carry her to the balcony to watch the sky go lavender. The city hums in the kind way. I kiss her soft hair and whisper into the warm air. Our home is a promise I'll keep. Inside, the kettle clicks off. I turn to go in, flick the fairy lights on, and feel the calm settle the way a door settles in its frame. Right place, right time, held fast.